Hi, Chris.
Hey, good morning, Manish. Yeah, we'll start in 2 minutes. Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Chris Koropati from Cambrian Lab. With me is my colleague, Manish Mathur. Today's session, we are going to be covering the topic of supplier development. We believe it is one of the most practical paths to building a better supply chain. In terms of logistics for the session today, we have roughly 3 sections. In the initial section, we are going to cover some of the highlights and some of the needs from a supplier development perspective. In the second section, we are going to look at some of the scenarios as well as processes that are very, very applicable from a supplier development perspective, and what some of these that have been proven pretty effective. And in the last section, we will be opening it up for Q&A. It's approximately 10 minutes, or 10 to 15 minutes would be for Q&A. In terms of the logistics of Zoom webinars, because we are going to be covering the Q&A towards the end, and it is very likely that you'll have questions throughout the session, any points that you would like to make. We'd appreciate it if you can type those questions into the Q&A bar. So our team will be monitoring those Q&A bars. The tab there where you can type in the question. That way, we keep track of all the questions, answer them properly towards the end of the session, as well as provide those when we send the recording and the materials to you after the session is completed. Okay, so please feel free to type in at any time your question in the Q&A bar. Okay, so with that, a little bit of an introduction. So we are based out of San Francisco Bay Area. So we have some offices in Midwest and the South and Northeast, supporting many of our customers in different industries here. A lot of us came from the industry, so we are pretty well versed with some of the opportunities and challenges in supply chain, new product introduction, and we have a very good understanding of the technology that supports these functions within the organizations. Okay. In terms of panelists, I am Chris Koropati. I lead product management at Cambrian Lab. With me is my Manish Mathur, who is also responsible for engineering. And both of us have 20 plus years of experience, operational experience in automotive, high tech, as well as technology industries. Okay. So we bring that appreciation and the perspective when we are talking about some of the key challenges in supplier development, how supply chains are transforming as we speak, and what are the opportunities to make suppliers better. Okay. Most of our work tends to happen with companies that have fairly intricate or large supply chains. We get involved in improving any of these processes from NPI to supplier development to supplier collaboration, engineering. These are all the topics that we help our customers improve. And supplier development tends to be a key aspect of a lot of these organizations that rely on a variety of suppliers, from component manufacturers to ODMs and contract manufacturers and third-party co-packers, co-man. So you can think of anybody that works with your organization to design, make, and deliver products. One of the major changes that we have seen in the last 2 years is that there is actually a about turn in terms of supply chain strategy. It used to be pretty common to focus excessively on consolidating suppliers, focusing on cost at the expense of everything else, and somewhat of a transactional relationship with suppliers. The new supply chain strategies and actually working relationships that we have seen are, in fact, just about opposite of what used to be the trend or normal before, whether we talk about pandemic or not, but the new supply chain is being reshaped by a variety of factors, from political to risk to geographical, and resiliency related issues. So the new supply chain, we're very likely is going to have more suppliers for every component, for every commodity, only because you'd want to build some resiliency into your supply chain. The second one is there is a holistic perspective of looking at, who is a better supplier, and cost is not the only factor there. Third one that we have seen happen now is that organizations also want to establish cross-functional relationships with suppliers, from executive to engineering, quality to quality. So those types of relationships are being established as we speak, and that gives a much better understanding of where your supplier is, how can they improve, and what you need to do to help them improve, right? So those are some of the major shifts that we have seen in the last, I'd say 2-3 years, and they'll continue for the foreseeable future, only because of the demands of how the new supply chain should look like. And we look at supplier development primarily as a big step up from what used to be traditional supply chain processes, from procure to pay to strategic sourcing. You're going all the way now to supplier development, because you have a vested interest in making your suppliers better, not just source from them, right? So that's the value. If you really look at the value, why should you invest time and money in some cases to make your suppliers better? And it has been proven beyond doubt among many industries and even among research that helping your suppliers, or having a supplier development program, is actually going to directly impact many of the operational excellence metrics, right? And it has direct influence, and it's better for your organization as well. So it makes total sense to spend time, resources, and money on supplier development. And the focus, of course, of supplier development is to really work along two angles. One is improving your supplier capability and improving their performance. And when we talk about supplier capability, you might come back and say, hey, we want to select capable suppliers. And that is the case, right? And when you do work with existing suppliers, and some of your, you have good relationships with them, and you are embarking on new initiatives that requires new skills. So there's other times when you have to think about, should we just improve capability of our existing suppliers, who we know works well with us. It just needs to add some capabilities for them, right? So those are the types of things where you might want to just focus on improving existing supplier capabilities. On the other hand, supplier performance is also a key aspect, because regardless of the level of supplier capability, their ability to meet your demands or requirements and perform at a high level is something that is important for you as an organization. So if suppliers are at risk, or there is a clear need for improvement, those are places where you may have to intervene and engage and get them better. But of course, first thing you need to do is be able to provide suppliers their performance. How are they doing, and what are the areas for improvement? Okay, and the goal, of course, towards the bottom here is you want to have as many suppliers as possible as preferred suppliers, so you have a working relationship. And the reason why you'd want to have a preferred supplier base is because they give you preference, or rather priority, when they are serving their customers. So they would much rather serve a preferred supplier to a customer than just have a transactional relationship, right? So you'd want to help them achieve this preferred supplier status. So these are three key, what we see as elements of supplier development that you can help your suppliers, their journey. And supplier development relies very heavily on, of course, a good relationship with the supplier. It cannot just be, issuing POs and, looking at if they're delivering or not, right? So you need to understand where they stand in terms of evaluations, give them, very good feedback, do some repeated or periodic audits, and provide very, very good performance assessment information to suppliers so that they know where the improvement opportunities are. Okay. And the types of activities that you may actually engage in include a variety of things. You may have to invest in training your suppliers in some cases if they don't exactly have the specific expertise that you're looking for. In some cases, we have seen many of our customers actually do investments, whether it is tooling or other aspects of it, inventory, and so on. So they actually commit money for that. And of course, these are more traditional supplier development activities, which include engineering support, manufacturing process engineering support. And then, of course, as they are working, you'd want to provide them an opportunity to make corrections. If there are problems, you'd want to put in a good supplier corrective action process and improvement processes like A3 reports, AD. And towards the end, of course, you do want to, if they are performing well, recognize and some way of reward their performance, right? So all of these come under the umbrella of supplier development activities that you as a supply chain team or key part of supply chain team can implement. The other thing that we also want to acknowledge is that it's a pretty heavy investment that you're making in supplier development, and not all suppliers need that. Okay, there are lots of suppliers which provide you with fairly routine things, which you just have to buy from them and use it, right? So those are the times when there is no real need for supplier development. On the other hand, a select group of suppliers which are very critical to your product and market success do require supplier development as a key program, right? And those are typically involved in your subsystem component design. They may be providing you some very key components or subsystems. They also use fairly intricate manufacturing and assembly processes, which you need to have some visibility and control over. And of course, as they're producing, you need to help them continually improve and make sure that issues are not coming up, right? So those are the times when you have to have a supplier development program to engage. And for all the need and so much of supply chains, that are engaged with suppliers, what we have seen, unfortunately, is that there is really no systematic process. Of course, there are companies that have very elaborate supplier management processes and policies and agreements with suppliers. What is missing, however, to support all of that is a systematic process and a supporting framework to help supply chain teams work with their suppliers on supplier development. Okay, and it doesn't mean there is one team that do this. Again, we emphasize this to be a very cross-functional engagement. From engineering all the way to supply chain to fulfillment, quality, there should be a one-to-one relationships with the supplier teams on those aspects. And we kind of roughly break it into three major areas, right? When there is a need. In the beginning, there's always a need. And to work with suppliers to get them to do something for you. And that typically happens as part of an NPI. Sometimes you're looking at doing more aggressive multi-sourcing, right? And you're looking at your supply base analysis and say, hey, where is the improvement opportunity? Which commodities require help, so on and so forth. And then use a variety of techniques to, assess your supplier capabilities that could be existing or new ones and bring them on board. Once they're on board, it is not sufficient. They're not ready to work with you. So you still have to get them ready so that they are able to provide you with the products and services in a very reliable and at a very high quality that you need, right? So there are lots of audits and throughout the readiness assessments, what we call, are they ready to ship? You can use some industry standard techniques like PPAPs, right? Or, if they need to do improvement throughout, even before they're ready to ship anything to you in a production sense, right? A lot of readiness checks and activities that you have to put in place to help your suppliers. And finally, once they are in fact working with you, one of the key things that we emphasize is providing suppliers a periodic input, assessments of how they're doing, right, along many different facets. And when you do that, you should also give an opportunity or like indicators of which are the areas where they should actually improve and what actions they should actually take care of those, right? So, and then follow through on them taking and putting in place those actions or corrective actions or improvement actions. So those are three main stages of supplier development where you need to engage. And of course, supporting all of that is various processes that you can use, both from a quality engineering and continuous improvement perspective. But these are more of, I would say, techniques that you can use to support all of the above. Okay. And what we have seen is, we've put together, one of our workflow engines is used quite extensively for supply chain collaboration. On what we have done is design certain frameworks, supplier development frameworks, so that you can put a systematic process together from a supplier development perspective. One is it does establish a cross-functional engagement relationship between your organization and the suppliers. So that's one key thing that we see. And the second one, of course, is, a lot of these work processes require, several assessments inbuilt and integration to many of your supply chain and ERP systems so that, you're not repeatedly missing information or things are falling apart, through the cracks. The handoffs are not happening, right? So those are key principles that we've put in place to support the supplier development. So if you look at it, I'm going to give you a few quick overviews, and then we'll look at how it is done. So in the beginning, of course, you're going to look at whether the needs are coming from an NPI programs or multi-sourcing needs or just supply-based assessments, right? And once you do find the need, how do you go about evaluating suppliers in a much more holistic manner? Cost is not the only thing that you should worry about. But you look at especially when you're selecting or picking new or existing suppliers for new programs, you need to look at it from a much broader perspective. And once there are, the techniques that you can use as part of that, it can include, just doing supplier research, self-assessments, product and process audits if they are existing supplier and they allow you to do that as part of the selection or evaluation process, right? And once they are within your environment where they're ready to engage as well as support you in your production activities, a whole new set of approaches need to be put in place, right? From production part approval process or primary product and process audits, production assessments, readiness checks. Those are all things that you can use to make sure that they are actually ready and be able to provide you in the volume and quality that you're looking at. And of course, once they are actually working, you can do performance monitoring and assessments. Different techniques at different times. You can look at the various elements of quality engineering. Again, this is something that we'll show you today on what is some of the more effective ways to do both performance reporting and assessments that can lead to improvement actions, them knowing which are the areas that they most need to focus on from an improvement perspective. All right, so we think supplier development is one of the more achievable things, fairly practical, actually does improve supplier satisfaction with you as a customer. And more importantly, it supports 3 key aspects of operational excellence, right? One is readiness of suppliers. Suppliers will definitely perform better compared to not doing it at all. And of course, you do need to support more suppliers and more work, but it does result in a robust and a more resilient supply chain. Okay. So with that, what I will do is take you through some of the different elements of the solution, or at least the approaches that we have seen work pretty effectively. We'll look at in the beginning, how capability assessments are done, how you understand your existing supply base. If there are sometimes, as part of new product introductions, people do request you to bring in new suppliers. How do you do that? There are certain workflows and techniques that we have seen work. And then once the supplier is onboarded, what other additional processes and workflows that you can put in place to make sure that they are ready and the gates are open for them to be able to support you in a production environment, right? And once they are in production, we'll look at, how do you conduct performance assessments, how do you provide periodic performance reports so that they know where to focus on from an improvement perspective. Okay, so we'll look at this whole thing in 3 stages. And once it is done, throughout this, feel free to type in any questions that you have in the Q&A bar for the Zoom. And once the demo is done, we'll come back and answer those questions. So what you're seeing here is the supplier development framework, different workflows, assessments that we've actually developed and seem to work very effectively in industry-oriented environments, right? So you can see that there are different elements, from the start or to all the way to different scenarios that people use to kind of support the life cycle of what we call supplier development or relationship, right? From the beginning, readiness, and then once they're doing work for you, how do you do performance assessments, etc. Supporting all of this, of course, is we do have people do use the workflows to work directly with suppliers. So when we say you have a cross-functional relationship with the supplier, it doesn't mean you just do audits and performance associate. You are working on a day-to-day basis among different things with suppliers, right? From supplier quality to supplier improvement, and many teams within your organization may be involved in all of that. So it's a more holistic way to work with suppliers than just sending a PO and expecting them to deliver and get on a phone call and discuss that, right? One-on-one is effective for an isolated incident, but for an overall strong relationship, you need to provide a more holistic approach. So when you look at suppliers, your existing suppliers, you might have a fairly good idea of where they are. These are based upon an assessment that you've already done with your existing supply base, from a capability perspective, from a performance perspective, the different types of suppliers that you're working with. What is the current relationship status you have? So clearly, a lot of preferred suppliers that you have, they're active. Several qualified that you're still not using, right? So this is your supply base, and if you want to dig deeper into actual suppliers, you'll be able to look at what they're doing, where they are at from a capability, performance, and relationship perspective. And you also might consider qualifying, right? So there is no need to, most of your supplier development activities are focused on the strategic customers, strategic suppliers, sorry, right? So to understand a little bit more better, I'm going to pick Intel here, right? So you have all the teams, and you do know a lot about the supplier, right? Where they're doing. More importantly, if these are suppliers that are providing you with key components, you also understand what is that they're doing for you, right? So it's a holistic view of what your supplier is and where they are at. A lot of this we work when we are setting these things up directly integrate with your existing supply chain systems, ERP systems, and all of the information comes, bulk of it, from those different systems that support your day-to-day processes with the suppliers. Okay, and more often than not, we also support certain workflows. They can be initiated directly by anybody within your organization, like asking for a new supplier request, or some of them are connected to engineering, right? There could be a new component request that may require a new manufacturer and new supplier related to that, a new component. So let's look at an example of a new supplier request that may be initiated for a specific need. So all workflows when we initiate here are something that most of our customers design themselves, specifically based upon how they actually do the work within the organization and with suppliers. So once they, so if you look at a workflow, so if you look at this from a graphical perspective, any new supplier, first can be requested by others. It could be production supplier or an MRO or non-strategic supply, right? So they can request it, but all of these steps are part of the overall supplier assessment and onboarding process, which is purchasing review, capability assessments, risk analysis. Once, of course, everybody is satisfied, there would be finance review, contract setup, and then you are going to bring a supplier on board. So part of that, when you're bringing on board, is, of course, there's a lot of information that people give. And that is provided by a cross-functional team, not just one person, right? So if you look at this finance, purchasing, engineering, everyone is involved, and the right people come in at the right time to provide that assessment of, hey, do we want to, how do we bring this supplier on board? And part of that, if you look at it, this is something that's already been done, is, purchasing did a supplier capability assessment, right? That's the responsibility of supplier purchasing. So they already did it. And they gave a score of 83, okay? 83, 0 to 100, they ran at 83. So how did that 83 come about? What actually happened as part of the new supplier assessment is a underlying assessment workflow where people within a cross-functional team within your organization, right? So you can see who are the people that assessed it, came in and evaluated the supplier along these different aspects. So if I open this, you will see that there is cost, quality, and under each of those, there are several other elements, right? And so initial cost, cost reduction agreement, right? So if you look at incoming quality, if you look at service level, lead time, so these are all the different elements of evaluating suppliers and what those weights are. Once people provide that assessment, how well is a supplier likely to do for the need, once the assessments come in, we know what the scores are, right, based upon that assessment and the weights. So it's a very cross-functional way and a more holistic way of looking at how a supplier is going to be. So if you were just to focus on cost, and as a matter of fact, cost is only 40% of the overall evaluation. As much more equal amount is given to service level, then obviously incoming quality is actually one of the highest of all the things, right? So, that's a more holistic approach to really looking at a supplier and bringing them on board for one, as a new supplier or a very specific need. So this is just looking at supplier. These capability assessments, and we look at performance assessments later on, is what is used to construct your supply base assessment, right? So once you're done with that, of course, a lot of the needs, most of the time are evaluated or really looked upon from the perspective of, is it a RFP that we are requesting, or are we looking at RFQ? So again, we emphasize that when you're looking at an RFP, right? So you're sending out to multiple people, and there are lots of items that you're requesting, and you've selected an existing supplier, and you're also getting a new supplier to respond to the RFP. Right? Again, this is another place where you have to really evaluate against, what is the particular angle that we are going to look at from an RFP perspective, right? So here too, these are questions that you have, and the assessment that is used, with different aspects of it that we looked at. So once you have that, you're actually going to look at a more holistic way of looking at, evaluating what the supplier is able to do for you, right? It's after that, you will assign, who is the correct supplier for a specific need. And sometimes, you might give to both of them with some, fair share rules, how much of the business goes to one supplier versus how much goes to another one, right? It could be both could be selected, but you at least know where do each of those things stand along multiple facets of the performance that you need. Okay, so you can use the same techniques, within, RFP. You can also do independent sourcing evaluations. So part of a lot of the sourcing evaluations that are done on a day-to-day basis are to support those RFPs and RFQs, right? And these are embedded within those. So everything that you saw in the RFP is supported by this sourcing evaluation for that one sourcing event. And again, this gives out, where do they fall in a holistic sense for that specific need. So here we are looking at, getting a production part and two options, right? One is Intel and another one is Qualcomm. And minimum score, maximum score, where do they fall for different aspects of the sourcing. So you can use a variety of techniques connected to your core business process of bringing in new suppliers or bringing in, supporting any type of RFPs, RFQs, or independent sourcing evaluations, right? So these are techniques that you can do to look at it from a holistic perspective, onboarding suppliers. Now, once you do onboard, and sometimes this is done even before selecting a supplier, you do actually want to do audits. Most of our customers start off as self-audits, right? So if you look at a self-audit here, you are asking suppliers to provide, their responses to specific questions that you have. So this is a very fairly standard set of questions, used in medical device industry, for example. You might initially start off as, hey, let me just do self-audit, let them answer, just to give you an idea. So one of the things that we enable one-to-one relationships and cross-functional relationships with suppliers is everything that you do in these workflows here are also accessible for suppliers, right? Suppliers also have a role to play. So in the example that I'm showing you here in Intel, so if you look at Intel, is one of our key suppliers, and we have Intel users, a couple of supplier admins, and one regular supplier participant, right? So these teams, these cross-functional teams from suppliers, they could be engineering from suppliers, purchasing and customer support and so on. They're all part of any of the workflows that you want them to participate in. Okay, so if I look at this example here, there are lots of different workflows for which they have access to, right? And suppliers can come in and out of these workflows at an appropriate point and do the right thing, right? So it's a continuous flow between your organization and suppliers. So we looked at supplier audit. Once you start, they actually can get it. So let me refresh the screen. And there'll be ones that will come and provide you the responses, right? So I can come in and yes, so suppliers are naturally part of the work that you're doing with them. So there is no special or very elaborate process you have to define for them to be included in your workflows. I mean, we see suppliers as part of like an extended team of yours, so they should be able to participate and work with you and your cross-functional teams very seamlessly. So that's our goal here, right? So they're doing a self-audit. Once that is done, there may be a few audit actions or that come out of it generally, right? So there are none so far, but we'll show you some examples that actually have that. And once that is done, you might also use certain industry standard approaches, what we call, right? Especially readiness checks. We always recommend some of your own plus plus your industry standard approaches. One such example here is supplier PPAP, right? A supplier PPAP is a fairly important process and a step in the overall readiness of a supplier, right? And what we have done here, at least one of our organizations, we have set up a supplier PPAP that is accessible to suppliers, and they can come in and participate in the PPAP initiation and submitting all the information. and responding back and forth. So if you look at this workflow, it has a fairly elaborate workflow, which phase one, team setup, the suppliers that actually come in and do all of this, right? And they'll get approvals and complete these activities. So they will be the ones that are participating in this workflow and finishing in all these activities. And then, of course, you as an organization have like a stage gate review opportunity to come in and accept all of the and make sure that suppliers are ready, right? So here you're looking at what are the requirements and whether you're going to be accepting or not. And some of them, still under review. So you have a fairly elaborate way, but very reliable way of making sure suppliers are ready. And of course, suppliers can also initiate PPAPs. So they can, if you want to keep it very simple, all you're doing is, just submit your PPAP documentation, right? So they can start it and send it out with your PPAP documentation, right? So the parts, control plans, documents, the FMEAs, they all come to you as a package. And once you're done, once it's approved, PPAP, their PPAP part is finished. So all of that, of course, there are initial PPAPs, and then there are engineering change related, manufacturing process change. They all require PPAP, new PPAPs. So you can make this flow happen, very naturally between you or your organization and the suppliers who participate and are a key part of the overall process. So of course, now they are ready to provide you with production parts. You've approved the PPAPs. So they can, at this point, use any of the, some of our customers use lately, been using a lot of PO collaboration, subcontract purchase orders. You have, co-manufacturers, co-packaging. There's a lot of order-related collaboration that actually happens. And, you can establish those relationships between your organization and suppliers. POs originate here, and then they, suppliers have an opportunity to respond. Can we fulfill the needs, or do we want to make any changes right? So all of that can be pretty much, one-to-one requirements, right? So in terms of, how they can meet or not meet the requirements or make any changes. So once you're done with that, so your customers or your suppliers are now working with you on a day-to-day basis. One thing that we actually recommend, if it is possible, and there are ways to make this thing very possible, is to provide them with quantitative performance reports. So it's while it's coming up, let me refresh this. So suppliers, when they log in, they have access to performance data, right? So they know what their current period is, what the performance is, what are the different elements of that score, right? Quality, service level. So the more they have, it's a lot easier for them to understand where they are, right? But this is a very quantitative way of doing, a lot of supply chain score metrics, etc. Are very meaningful pieces of information that, from a quantitative perspective, gives a good idea for them to understand what is going on, right? So that's one approach, which is give them, periodic information. It could be monthly. A lot of supplier performance reporting is something that we have seen monthly. At a minimum, you have to give them quarterly, but monthly is what makes sense. The second aspect of it, which is just as equally important for us, is you doing actual performance assessments. And I'm going to show you a performance assessment that is proven to be fairly effective. Right. So let me open a separate window so that we see the difference. The performance assessment is something where you actually evaluate the performance of a supplier along multiple facets and get input from your internal teams on how a supplier is doing. So when you are evaluating suppliers, right? So you have something what we call a performance framework. So you can design different things for different types of suppliers. Like, for example, if you look at, let's say, commodity manufacturers, right? So these are parts delivery. So these are the different performance facets that are important from a commodity manufacturer perspective, right? So if I expand this, for NPI support, you're saying these are the different elements that are important. NPI schedules, latest products. For delivery and supply, these are the three elements. For quality, of course, these are the main things. And from cost, right? So you would design these performance aspect, I would say, frameworks. And believe me, each type of supplier need their own. So this one has, several, 6 of them, but it's a fairly extensive one. Just if you look at technology, there could be a lot of different things. So once you define this, you're going to use this to get feedback or ask your cross-functional teams to provide feedback using something called a performance assessment. So a performance assessment is a way of asking, hey, component for NPI support, I want component engineering teams to provide feedback. For delivery and supply, I want component engineers as well as supply chain teams to provide some feedback. For quality, so different colleagues from different functions of your organization will come in and give you feedback about how this particular supplier for this assessment period rates, what is their subjective evaluation, right? Because it is asking some for very specific things about more qualitative way of handling this. So once you get the feedback, and this is sent out as fairly simple surveys, they go in as questions that they can answer. Let's say, for example, if I select a login as this user, right? So there is something called assessor input, right? So I'm going to come in and answer this question. Yes, how much rating should I provide? How well does supplier provide appropriate resource and support? 1 is not very well, 10 is for sets the standard. So I can select 9. So that's how people come in and your cross-functional teams and give you the input. Once that is done, so I'm going to log back in as the other person who initiated that request. Let's look at that. Once the feedback starts coming, you can calculate the overall score, your performance assessment score. And so that's overall score they're getting, 6.55 out of 10. They also know which are the areas that they need to actually look at from a weighted score. There is also a lot of actually, if I export the data, there's a lot of suggestions on how to improve and what to do about it, right? So from a workflow perspective, you are going to review, and so there's lots of comments here. So supports proactively when there are other places where you actually get comments, right? So this is a very, very good feedback that suppliers. Of course, out of that, you can also create some actions, right? Once the performance scorecard is, published and reviewed with suppliers' performance assessments scorecards, you can actually start to put in some improvement actions, right? And then they can follow through. Just to give you an idea of those types of, they can be called corrective actions, improvement actions, doesn't matter. We would normally put corrective actions against any issues like non-conformances or audit-related issues versus A3 report and problem solving as an improvement program put in place. Okay, so if you look at some of the supplier corrective actions here, they are being initiated out of, let's look at this one here, right? So if you look at the corrective action report, some of them are coming from different problems, right? There's a production related issue, right? And how is supplier going to be addressing this, right? They're going to put in the 2 corrective actions and then updating, these 4 different documents and processes that are involved, right, for these kinds of corrective actions. So you can set it up so that there's always a follow on that the suppliers are actually able to support, and they can also be initiated from many places. So let me use the other one. Let's go back to our supply chain. Things, the corrective actions and improvement projects, etc., can be initiated from many places. So in this example here, so if you look at our audit, this may have resulted in a corrective action, right? Audit finding that the sub-supplier development program is missing. So, we actually are asking suppliers to come in and they respond. And once we are satisfied with suppliers' implementations, we're going to close out this supplier corrective action. But suppliers will actually come in and participate in all of those workflows. So with that, what we'll do is pause the session. So one of the major advantages is you pretty much make it everything, how you approach supplier development, how you approach the interaction between you, establish that foundation of a relationship between you, your organization, and the supplier using these different workflows. These, of course, can fit in with your existing supplier management processes. So if you have some very specific way of doing it, you can design that. We provide like what is called a workflow template, right? So you can, for example, if you look at supplier corrective action, right? A lot of teams, organizations that we work with have a very different, very company-specific way of doing corrective action. So you can design exactly the way you would want it to be done between you and the suppliers using these, process design tools. Okay, so the final closing out before we close out, you may be wondering, how is all of this supply chain data, parts and purchase orders, how is all of that coming through into this workflow engine? So what we do, in fact, support is a direct integration with a lot of the, what we call core supply chain systems. That could be your engineering system, that's your ERP, that's your supply chain planning systems. If you have things like JDA or SAP IBP, etc. So all of this, the workflow engine is connected to and exchange information back and forth, so that there is no break in terms of process as well as information. So with that, we'll stop and look at any questions that teams have. Okay, one question is, do suppliers need to purchase this software, right? If, what do they need to do? No, suppliers are, we treat suppliers as part of your extended team. So when you're using it, your suppliers can also be part of the solution, a part of the workflows, without you having to do anything from a setup perspective or even purchasing anything for them. So they are just as equivalent or slightly different from your existing team members that are participating in these workflows. So no need to do anything special for suppliers. Now, there is a process for, especially if you don't have anything in place right now, there may be an onboarding process for them. You'd have to train them on how to participate in these workflows, initiate some actions from their side. But that, is also fairly minimal. You can actually even send a video or something, and, they can do a self-service oriented approach to participate and be part of the workflows. Okay, please, you have any other questions? There's another question on, the performance assessment frameworks. Is that something that is standard, or is it something that we develop? So yeah, no, the performance assessment frameworks is based upon your understanding of performance. Not, we do not provide any standard ways, because it varies from company to company and the type of supplier to the type of supplier, right? So if you have strategic suppliers versus 3PLs versus co-manufacturers, contract manufacturers, ODMs, they all need different ways of evaluating, supplier performance. So we can help you set it up. It's not a big issue, but in terms of weights and specific facets that you need to think about, you should look at your sourcing team or your supply chain team, or decide cross-functionally what makes the most sense from a supplier performance assessment framework perspective. So here is a good example. We do think there is an optimum number of facets and questions that you should consider. I would say it should probably max out at maybe 30, 40, 5 to 6 facets, and a total of between 20 and 40 questions is a right volume to have. Okay. If you look at these, so the different aspects of it, NPI quality. So if you look at quality, so a lot of it is really what you think is, appropriate for your organization, and the relationship between you and the supplier. What are you expecting them to perform on? Okay. So there are no more questions. So thank you for taking the time to join the session. We will send you the recording and the presentation once Zoom makes it available to us. And if you have any questions, there's one thing that we want to leave you with. One is, if you are interested in trying this approach, we think it works very well with your strategic suppliers, and they appreciate it a lot. You can try this, and you can also conduct a free proof of concept with a few select suppliers. We can help you with that process. So let us know. And any other questions that you have, if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us via email. Our contact information will be included in the presentations. And feel again, thank you for taking the time to join this session. And have a great day. Bye.